Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Ryan Truschlett of Weather Tiger, and I'm going to bring you the very latest this afternoon on extremely dangerous Hurricane Delta, a Category 4 hurricane crossing the western Caribbean and a threat to the central Gulf Coast later this week. So I'm going to let the audience come in for about another minute and a half, and then I will get right to the forecast. All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Ryan Truschlett of Weather Tiger, and I'm going to be walking you through the forecast today for a very dangerous Category 4 Hurricane Delta crossing the western Caribbean. So let's get right to the key messages from the National Hurricane Center. What they want people to know is they're looking at a troubling forecast for Hurricane Delta. Number one, the short-term impacts are going to be a catastrophic storm surge and hurricane conditions for the Yucatan Peninsula, with the first landfall expected near Cancun overnight tonight. We've got heavy rainfall for the Caribbean, and also the potential for heavy rainfall later this week across the central Gulf Coast and into the central U.S. And then their third key message, they want to communicate the increasing likelihood of life-threatening storm surge, dangerous hurricane force winds along the central Gulf Coast beginning on Friday. So you have a few days to prepare if you're in the central Gulf Coast. The cone stretches from western Louisiana all the way to the western portions of the Florida Panhandle. You should be reviewing your hurricane plan and getting ready to act if you need to, if you go under a warning in these areas. So moving on to the next page, I'm just going to show you this because this is the Hurricane Center's discussion every 6 hours with the full advisory package at 10 a.m. Central, 4 p.m. Central, 10s and 4s if you're in the Central Time Zone. This was the NHC's discussion, and as of advisory time at 10 a.m., the interesting part here is their intensity at 10 a.m. was 115 miles per hour. Their 12-hour forecast was for increase in intensity to 140 miles per hour. Well, as of the 2 p.m. intermediate advisory, we have already gotten to 140 miles per hour. So this is the Hurricane Center's advisory intensity, and for the last, 4 advisory cycles with this system, we've been significantly underestimating the rate of intensity. The actual intensity is this kind of dotted line, and these blue lines are what they thought the intensity was going to be. We're above all the intensity forecasts, and now, as of the middle of the day, we're actually up here at 115 knots already. So we are exceeding expectations, to be sure. This is what Delta looks like from visible satellite imagery right now. It's a very compact storm. This is a system where hurricane force winds extend out no more right now than, say, 20, 25 miles from the center. So all the hurricane force winds are in this red ring as of the last image there. It's a tiny little thing. It doesn't necessarily look like you would expect a Category 4 hurricane to look. You don't see a visible eye. I'll get back to that in just a minute. So this is Delta on infrared satellite imagery. These grays and blacks are very high up cloud tops, indicating intense rising motion in the core of the storm. And it's these updrafts right in here around the core of Delta's powerful core that are delivering those major hurricane force winds, and really not anywhere else. You still can't see an eye because these updrafts are so powerful that they're kind of overshooting a very small eye, and you can't actually see it from satellite imagery, but it's there. And we know it's there a couple ways. One, this is radar imagery from the Cayman Islands in the Western Caribbean, and Delta is a very small storm. Cayman Islands here around 125 miles away from the center of Delta, and they're just having a breezy day with no dangerous conditions there. There's the right in here, there's the tiny little core, and it's everything that's the destructive and damaging is right in this small area of these oranges and yellows as seen on radar. Now, how else do we know what the storm structure is? Well, we're sending out aircraft to check this thing out continuously, NOAA and Air Force aircraft. And this line right here, line F, that's a closed, that says closed, that means it's a closed eye wall. You have intense convection ringing the entire center, and this C4 means closed and 4 nautical miles wide. So the eye is only 4 miles wide. It's very small. More typical eye diameter would be 20 or 30 miles. So 4 miles wide is very small, and that's why Delta's been able to intensify so rapidly today. The smaller the storms, the faster they do tend to intensify if they're in the right environment for it. So the aircraft that was out there earlier today was tracking west-northwest movement. Each of these dots is when they cross the center. The pressure was dropping earlier in the morning, but it's kind of stabilized in the upper 950s right now. The plane hasn't been in there for a couple hours, but might be indicative of at least some short-term leveling off of intensity. And it's, again, the wind field is very tight, so this quick ramp up, those peak winds determined by the airplane to be around 115 knots, 140 miles per hour, category 3, category 4 hurricane, right in that little area right near the eye wall, right around the center, just these few nautical miles of those damaging winds. So what is going to happen with this storm in the short term? First, let's talk about the next 24 hours or so. So this is Delta right down here. There's the center of circulation. And up here, this is an area of high pressure. These are the steering currents about 3.5 miles up in the atmosphere. And the steering flow here is all out of the east-southeast to west-northwest. So we're pushing the storm west-northwest at about 15 miles an hour, and it's going to cross the Yucatan Peninsula overnight tonight and head up into the southern Gulf of Mexico tomorrow. Then you can, if you're in Florida, you can thank this high-pressure ridge for keeping us safe. But if you're in Louisiana, this is a very bad pattern. It's actually quite reminiscent of the steering flow we had with Laura earlier this year. So obviously that's a huge problem for Louisiana. So if we go forward in terms of intensity forecast, well, Delta has about 18 hours left over the water before it gets to the Cancun area, and it's crossing some of the warmest waters on Earth. These are water temperatures in the upper 80s, and they're very deep as well. So lots and lots of energy for Delta to take advantage of as it crosses the Western Caribbean. We're going to have a brief period of time where Delta's crossing over land and likely to weaken somewhat, but then it moves back out in the Gulf of Mexico. Southern Gulf of Mexico, not quite as warm and deep as the Caribbean, but still plenty warm and deep to support major hurricane status, at least in the Southern Gulf. We'll get to the Northern Gulf later on. So these are some parameters for what you look at for intensification. Right now we're looking at shear right in this 10 to 15 knot sweet spot that is sometimes a little bit of a problem, maybe has acted to arrest intensification a little bit this afternoon. I do see most models suggest that the shear will diminish overnight tonight, and we may see another round of intensification pick up later this afternoon through landfall in the overnight hours. SSTs, of course, in the upper 80s, right around 30 Celsius. There's lots and lots of moisture associated with this, so moisture won't be a problem. Again, we're talking about Category 4 hurricane coming into Cancun area overnight tonight. Potential for a Category 5. It's very difficult to actually make accurate predictions when a hurricane is this small and this strong, but 5 is a possibility. 4 is very likely. Some of the models that have been doing better with intensity, this is an intensity scheme out of MIT that's actually been capturing some of this rapid intensification trend. And currently we're up here at a category 4, and this model, last few runs of it have been peaking out as a 5 overnight tonight before moving inland, backing off to a 3, and then showing maintenance of category 3 or potentially low-end category 4 crossing the southern Gulf. So that's what we're looking for. That's in line with what the National Hurricane Center expects as well. Let me clear that out. There we go. So this is steering flow on Thursday. Now here's delta in the west central Gulf of Mexico. Here's that remaining ridge still holding tight over Florida. And here's an oncoming trough of low pressure at mid-levels that's moving west across Texas. And what that's going to do is turn steering flow out of, it's going to have a track like this, and then we're going to turn steering flow more south to north, and as it approaches the coast, steering flow more out of the southwest to northeast. So that's going to probably result in a track that bends like this and inland somewhere in central or eastern Louisiana late Friday or early Saturday. So going forward now, here's one idea. Another thing that's important going forward is that don't take this one model as gospel, but the system will also expand as it moves over land, potentially goes through an eyewall replacement cycle. It will get bigger. So we're talking about a pretty large area of gale force winds across the central Gulf, and that too is going to drive a pretty strong coastal flooding event, even for areas potentially farther away, with a long southerly fetch as this thing approaches the coastline. So that's another thing to look out for. I don't want to get too much into specifics of impacts at this point because we're still a long way out. Now, one thing that's come up in the discussion of this is the northern Gulf being much cooler. That's true. Here's the dividing line basically between water temperatures in the mid-80s and water temperatures in the lower 80s or lower, and these shelf waters in green here are even water temperatures 80 or below. National Hurricane Center has a Category 4 a hurricane in the Gulf, and it weakens to a 3 as it begins to move north, and they have a Category 1 inland. I think that we're talking about here, if we do re-intensify to a 4, you're going to lose a category or 2 of intensity as you move north, but it's not going to be an instantaneous adjustment. This is something, I have something for you called maximum potential intensity. That's a calculation of, with the water temperature and depth and some of the upper level conditions, how strong theoretically of a storm could the water support. Well, north of this line here, this black line, we're talking about only really a Category 1 or 2 being able to be supported if it was over those waters for a long period of time. But moving 20 miles per hour inland, it won't necessarily have time to adjust to that. So will the storm be weakening? Yes, almost certainly as it comes inland, but it's likely to be weakening from major hurricane status. So I'd say landfall intensity of anywhere from Category 1 to Category 3 is quite possible here. Now here's a quick look at the models, and all the models are pretty tightly clustered here. They all have landfall essentially between Lafayette and New Orleans sometime overnight Friday into Saturday. I think maybe we could edge a little bit east here with time, but I think the target being central or eastern Louisiana is likely to hold through the forecast period. There wasn't really a big adjustment overnight, even though models whiffed badly on intensity. So this area, I think, between Lafayette and eastern Louisiana is probably where, somewhere in that range is where the center is going to come in. Now, I will say we have not seen much in the way of forecast adjustments in the past day. We did see some adjustments south yesterday, but really haven't. All the NHC forecasts for the past 36 hours have been tightly clustered across central and eastern Louisiana. We don't really have any reason to doubt that NHC forecast. They've been doing a great job this year. They were dead on with Laura in a similar synoptic pattern. So, you don't want to fixate too much on the precise track of the system because it's going to be a large hurricane by the time it makes landfall. This is simulated radar from HWRF. Again, don't focus on the exact forecast track or intensity here. This is just meant to show that as you approach the coast, shear increases, water temperatures cool. You kind of crack open the southern eye wall here is open, so we're not as intense of a storm as we are right now with a closed eye wall, but we have large area of banding near the center and to the east, and all this area advancing northeast with time. You know, I would expect to see some quite inclement weather, certainly in the Mississippi and Alabama Gulf Coast as well, even Pensacola. And if the track shifts east, you know, the further the track shifts east, the worse things will be in the Western Panhandle. I think for the Western Panhandle, I don't see at this time or that we'd be dealing with a direct landfall. And of course, we had a big shift in forecast with Sally. This is a pretty different synoptic environment with quicker steering flow. So I don't think we're going to see that large of an adjustment with time, but certainly Pensacola, given that there are actively damaged structures, and you'll be dealing with coastal flooding as well from that southerly fetch. This is a system we need to prepare for too, as well out there. Just one other thing I want to note before I close today is because Delta is going to be moving at maybe 15-20 miles per hour as it comes inland, we're not going to be doing the same sort of coverage or accumulations of extremely heavy flooding rainfall that we did with Sally, where there was 15, 20, 25 inches of rainfall over a wide area. The faster movement here means coastal areas that are near the center, 4 to 8 inches I would expect. Further inland, maybe talking 2 to 4 inches across the inland deep south that get the remnants of this system. We'll keep watching that, of course. The areas that saw heavy rainfall from Sally, of course, you don't need a lot of additional rainfall to cause more problems. We'll keep an eye on it, but right now that fast forward motion is your friend there. So here's a final look at Hurricane Delta. It's intensified almost as fast as any storm in recorded Atlantic hurricane history, going from a depression to a Category 4 storm in just over a day. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on this. This is going to be coming up into the west central Gulf of Mexico. Louisiana, you need to be preparing now for the possibility of a major hurricane landfall, and hoping that this weakens as it comes north and isn't a major hurricane, but we need to be prepared for that. Further east into Mobile, Pensacola, you need to be watching this carefully as well. You're not in the bullseye right at this point. I would expect some rain and coastal flooding further east, however. Anytime a major hurricane is crossing the Gulf of Mexico, moving south to north, you know that the central Gulf Coast sees widespread coastal flooding impacts. So, let's see. I'm just looking for some questions. One point, just someone mentions hoping Delta doesn't sit around like Sally. It's not going to do that because it's caught in a quick steering flow environment. These winds are aloft, are 15, 20 knots. They're going to be ushering the storm pretty quickly north and east, and it's not going to sit around like Sally did. So I think that's any other questions that I can take that are easy to address. Chances it sits and spins like Sally, minimal. And yes, the water is colder now, so that really helps. And you can thank Sally for that. Sally, by virtue of sitting over the northern Gulf, churned up a lot of cooler water with depth. So that was a good thing. All right, everyone. Well, if you're in Louisiana, if you're in Mississippi, if you're in coastal Alabama, you're in the western Florida Panhandle, this area I've outlined in here, please review your hurricane kit. Get ready for a hurricane. I'm hoping for the best for you guys. I'll be watching it carefully this week and back with more live videos this week up until landfall Friday or Saturday. All right, take care, everyone, and keep watching the skies.